Hi, it's Mike from TRIDOS.DESIGN, and in this video we'll go over the installation for the AAP TDC Upgrade Kit for the stock hopup chamber. Keep in mind that this does only work on the stock hopup chamber for the AAP-01s, and in case if you're running an aftermarket upper, something like a Mamba kit or similar, you will also want to get the Universal Drill Jig, as the included drill jig that comes in the kit works only for the stock AAP-01 and AAP-01C Shinobi upper receivers. So keep this in mind. We also covered this in this video, so later on in the drilling procedure. For this installation, you'll want to get a PH1 screwdriver, a 2mm and a 1.5mm hex key, and a small hammer can come in handy, as well as you need something to drill a hole with, and preferably some kind of scrap wood to not damage the table. So let's get started with the installation. Let's put these aside. For the pistol, we can go ahead and remove the hopper, and we can put aside the lower. We won't be needing that for the installation. And then we can go ahead and start unpackaging the TDC kit. So this is the included drill jig, alongside with a 4.2mm drill bit. And let's get the rest of the parts out. So this is the TDC cover that goes on the stock chamber, a thumb screw and a grub screw. Keep in mind that both of these have a non-standard fine pitch M4 threads, so these give you a better accuracy when it comes to adjusting the hop. And you also get an included CNC machine nub that goes on top of the bucking. So we'll start out with disassembling the upper. So we'll want to go ahead and take the 2mm hex and start by removing the blowback unit. Put this aside. Now we can go ahead and move on to removing the hopup chamber. Make sure to keep track of the screws where you place them. So we can now go ahead and remove the stock assembly. We can put this aside for now. We'll go ahead and start with the harder part, which is drilling the hole. For this one, you'll want to take the drill jig and install it like this. So the chamfered part goes towards the front, and on the side there's a small channel that matches up with a small slit on the receiver. So just make sure to align that and push it in place. It should slide nicely in, something like that. And this is optional, but we recommend you install the plastic threaded screw for the drill jig so it doesn't move. Tighten it a little bit. It doesn't have to be too tight. If you tighten it too much, then it might start to skew a little bit. So that's in place. We can go ahead and take the board, and you'll want to install the drill bit. And before we drill, I just wanted to quickly show also the procedure for the aftermarket uppers. So in this case, we have a Mamba upper, and this is the Universal Drill Jig. And for this one, you basically have to treat it like a hopup chamber that you screw in place, and it just comes with 2 screws. You remove it, go ahead and slide it in place. And you reinstall both of the screws. Make sure they're tight. And this is basically ready for installation. For this drill jig in particular, we recommend you actually take the drill bit, and before you start drilling, install it in place and hammer it. That way the drill bit will actually make a center punch of sorts. That way the drill bit is less likely to slip away from the right position. Just give it a few good taps, and then you can go ahead and either remove the drill bit or start drilling it by putting inside the drill bit. and the drill. In this case, we'll just remove it, as we won't be drilling this one, and we'll go back to the stock one. And if you notice, the screw on the bottom makes it so that the upper receiver sits a bit wonky. So what I usually do is I put it on the side and make sure that it sits flat on the board. That way you can make it a bit more controllable when you drill it. So we'll go ahead and drill the hole, and just make sure that you hold the drill in as perpendicular as you can to the surface you're drilling. So that's the hole drilled. As you can see, nice clean hole, and we can go ahead and just remove the screw. We won't be needing this, but you can keep the drill jig in case you have to drill a different upper later on. So if you switch something, so yeah, just put them aside. Maybe don't throw it out just yet. And just make sure to get rid of the debris, and you should be left with a clean, nice hole. So we can go ahead and get rid of the drill and the board. Now we can move on to actually installing the TDC parts. So for this one, we'll have to take the hopup chamber apart to remove the original hopup mechanism. So to do that, we first have to take the 1.5mm hex keys and remove these two screws from the sides. Make sure you don't lose them. We then remove it from the other barrel, and we'll go ahead and use PH1 screwdriver to remove this screw first. Then we can go ahead and remove the hopup wheel, and also the other one. For this one, you might need to wiggle it a little bit, and it will just come off. Next up, we want to take out all 4 screws of the hopup chamber. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. All of these screws are the same length, so there's no difference in which holes they go. And this is the final step. We need to open up the hopup chamber. And we will need to get rid of this sheet metal part. This is the original hopup adjuster, and we can put this aside. In case you're changing the bucking, this is a good time to do that. Otherwise, we can just go ahead and install it back together. Make sure that the barrel is properly notched in place and hasn't moved out. We can go ahead and reinstall these 4 screws. These 4 parts we won't be needing, so we can go ahead and use the included Ziploc bag that came with the kit and just throw them in there so we don't lose them. Just in case we ever want to reinstall them back in place, that's a good idea. So we can now move on to installing the actual TDC parts, and next up is the CNC nub. This is required for you to apply a hop to the bucking, and this is CNC machine from the aluminum. And if you'll notice that one side of the nub is actually slightly chamfered, so this means that if the BB enters from this side, depending on the bucking, this might affect it or not. You might have a more gradual hopup application, but you can experiment and install it either way, see if it makes any difference. We'll go ahead and install it with the notch facing the backside of the gun, so we'll go ahead and do that. Once you install it, it should look something like this. Just make sure that if you apply the pressure from the top, it goes down and up easily. It should have no resistance whatsoever, but it should be a pretty tight fit. So if you have some trouble fitting it, just make sure you're putting it down vertically. Maybe some tweezers can help you. So this is the CNC nub installed. We can go ahead and take the actual TDC cover. line up the flat side where the small peg is, and you just want to go ahead and start clipping it on. Make sure to do it slowly and carefully to not have the CNC nub jump out of place, and it should clip in something like that. Make sure that on both sides it's clipped. On this one it's the flat edge, and on this side, as you can see, there's a small edge that clips in place where the bucking side goes. So now you can go ahead and make sure that the bucking is properly installed in place. There's no issues before we go forward. And now all that's left to do is reassemble it back. So just place it back together like so. Use the 1.5mm hex key to reinstall the small screws from the sides. Next up, we have to install it back in place. So for this one, we can go ahead and just push it straight. It will be a bit of a force to get it in place. And in case if you're doing some maintenance and want to remove it, there's a small trick that can help you. As you can see, if you try to pull it straight out, it will get stuck a little bit. So what you do is you basically have to twist it 90 degrees counterclockwise, and then you can pull it out much easier. This is due to the fact that it's quite a bit tight on the top side, so it doesn't leave a big gap, unlike the original hopup chamber. So this is something to keep in mind. We can now go ahead and reinstall these two screws. Now the final step is to install the actual TDC screw, and in this case we give you two options. So both of these are fine pitch M4 screws, and either you can go ahead with the invisible installation, which is just a grub screw, and it will sit flush with the upper, or alternatively you can also use our grub screw that's included in the basic kit, and this one is also compatible with our CNC machine top rail, which gives you the option for the clickiness and a more solid top rail. So in this case, we'll go ahead and use the grub screw, and it's very important that whenever you install the screw in or out, you make sure that it's actually threading in nicely. So just make sure that you keep the screw as vertical as possible to avoid any cross threading. On these fine pitch screws, it's a bit easier to cross thread the screw than on the regular screw, so just be careful. It should go out, it should go in pretty easily for the first few turns, so just something to keep in mind. And we can go ahead and install it, and then you can go ahead and check through the barrel if there's some hop being applied. And as you can see here, we are starting to get some hop, and everything looks normal. We can go ahead and back out the screw somewhere where it's almost flush, and then there's no hop being applied on the stock bucking. It may depend on different buckings. So we can go ahead and reinstall the blowback unit with the sights. And we can go ahead and clip it back together. And that's the installation complete. Now you have a perfectly invisible, nice looking TDC thumb screw, and it uses 2.0mm hex key to adjust it. So in case you're using an average holster, then that's the same size hex key that's on the universal holster. So, and as always, if you run into any issues, please give us a message. You can reach us via email or at our Facebook page, TRIDOS Airsoft, and see you on the field.